Hey everyone, I hope you're all well today. A big thanks to everyone here who's right on time for the kickoff. We always appreciate that, but obviously we're going to give just a few moments for other people to arrive and join us for the live session before we get going and dive into the content. So while we're waiting, I'll just quickly introduce our speaker for the session today. So many of you will have undoubtedly seen him on LinkedIn because every time there's a new Google Ads feature, you can pretty much guarantee Adrian's posted about it already. So yeah, very glad to have Adriaan Dekker here with us today to discuss all things Performance Max. So how's it going with you today, Adriaan?
Hi guys. First of all, thanks for joining, and thank you for the invitation. I'm fine. Not a lot of updates today, so I'm still chilled. And how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm sure you'll make up for it with the updates after the webinar, and tomorrow we'll probably get more updates than usual. But yeah, are
Yeah,
you're calling in from Rotterdam, right?
yeah. I'm living near Rotterdam at the moment.
I don't know. Did you attend the Google Think conference that was on in Amsterdam recently?
No, they did not invite me. I think it was invite only.
Ah, right. Because I saw Bob from Bob and Miles. He posted about it. I didn't realize it was an invite only event. I thought that was a kind of public conference.
Yeah, I think so. But I've I still have to ask Bob, but I can't remember that they posted something online. Otherwise, I should have known. So maybe it's my mistake. Maybe I
Yeah.
slipped.
Well, we'll have to check with Bob and see what happened there. But one of the other
Yeah.
things I saw on LinkedIn, which is relevant at the moment, is Adriaan, you recently released a consent mode V2 implementation video, which did very well and got a lot of traction on LinkedIn. So for people who might not have already implemented consent mode V2, where can they go to find that video that you put together?
Yeah, they can just go to my LinkedIn, scroll to my post. Maybe you need to scroll a bit down because I post actively. And then if you just react, I can send it to you, or you just can send me a message and I will send the video to you. It's a Loom video, so I will explain how you can install it. That's the advanced mode. I also made another one for the basic mode, how you can install that one. So yeah, just text me or send me a message on LinkedIn, and then I will send it to you. Make sure we are connected so that I can send it to you, or you can otherwise send me an email.
Nice. Yeah. Well worth checking out if you're need to get consent mode V2 implemented. So we've had a few more people join now. So we can kind of get going. Just again, if anyone's joined in the past couple of minutes, welcome. Very glad to have you here, either live or watching back on demand. For those that don't know me, my name's James. I'm the content manager here at Lunio, and I'll be hosting the webinar today, asking the questions and attempting to keep us on track for time. There are some loud construction noises going on outside my flat today, but I have been told that they're not coming through on the microphone. But just apologies in advance if you can hear any background noise on my end, but I think we should be okay. We're aiming for around 50 minutes to get through the content today, and we will have some time left at the end for Q&A with Adriaan, which I'll say a bit more about in a second. We've got a lot to cover, but we should be able to get through it all. And there are just a few other very quick bits of housekeeping that I'll just run through now before we go into the agenda. So as you can see in the chat, one of the pinned comments, we are recording the session today and it will be available to watch back on demand. We'll also be creating a written recap of the webinar today, and we'll be posting that on the Lunio blog next week. So be on the lookout for that. As I said previously, if you have any questions for Adriaan, please pop those into the Q&A tab, which you can see on the right-hand side here within Goalcast. That just means your question won't get lost in the public chat, and we will try to get round to as many questions as we can at the end of the session. We'll also have someone from our team here at Lunio behind the scenes responding to some of those questions via the chat as well. So questions for Adriaan, just put them into the Q&A tab. Next to the Q&A tab, you'll see we have got a tab called Docs, and I'll be directing your attention there at various parts throughout the webinar today. And you can go to the Docs tab to get more context and also get some free resources too that will relate to some of the content we're covering. In the docs section, you can also find the link to Adriaan's Google Ads LinkedIn newsletter. So if you aren't already subscribed, I highly recommend doing that now. It's one of the best resources out there for keeping up to date with all the updates from Google Ads. And I know, Adriaan, your subscriber count has been growing like crazy over the past 6 months, which is great to see. We'll also be running a few audience polls during the session to get your input and your opinions for everyone here that's viewing today. And you can vote on those in the polls tab. So please do give us your responses there. So when a new poll is open, you will see a notification pop up within Goalcast, and you can respond to that poll by clicking on the polls tab. And just on that note, I'm just going to bring up our first poll on screen here. Just to clarify, the other polls won't appear on screen. You'll have to go to the polls tab for them. But the poll that we've got here is, Microsoft have rolled out their own Performance Max campaign type globally last week. And do you plan on using it? So just before I pass over to you, Adriaan, I'll just have to quickly say this is one of the worst branding efforts of all time, because everyone already associates PMax with Google, and Microsoft have called their similar solution exactly the same thing. I suppose the benefit is that advertisers on Microsoft will instantly understand what's likely on offer with this campaign type, but it does seem like a real lack of creativity on Microsoft's part. So have you used them, Adriaan, and how have you found Microsoft's Performance Max?
So the update came, I think, around 10 days ago that they globally launched PMax. Like you already said, it's not a real creative name. Normally, I use Microsoft Ads to import my Google Ads to them. So that's already a bit the status right now. I'm going to experiment with it. I have not yet experimented with it, but in the next few weeks, I will launch a PMax campaign in Microsoft Ads. I think it's just, still a small competitor in the market. So I don't have real high expectations, but we will see. We will give it a try. It's more an experiment. So
yeah, I think looking at the poll responses here, it looks like many people are kind of in the same camp as you, Adriaan. Just a few people have already tried it out. Quite a few people planning to experiment with it, and a few people on the fence. And then, some people not going to be touching it at all. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Microsoft. They tend to be a couple of years behind what Google are doing. Hence the delay with their own PMax campaign type. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. So I'll stop sharing that poll now. And just to quickly say again, when we open the other polls, you can just click on the polls tab to give us your responses there. So with that, that's kind of all the housekeeping out of the way. And I'm just going to bring up the agenda that we've got for the session today here. And we've got 10 main points to cover on the agenda. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to run through these quickly. So firstly, we'll be looking at the Gemini generative AI models for PMax. Next, we'll talk about how to make the most of PMax's new search term insights. Then we'll cover how to accelerate campaign performance with search themes. And in relation to search themes, we've actually written an in-depth blog on that topic at Lunio, which you can also find in the docs tab. And we've included advice on how you can safely use search themes without having PMax cannibalize your standard search campaigns. So worth having a look at that if you are interested in search themes. After that, we will discuss using Performance Planner for Performance Max. Then we'll move on to controlling landing pages with URL rules for PMax. After that, we'll show you how you can exclude any keyword topic or placement from your PMax campaigns, which historically hasn't been all that easy to do. After that, we'll discuss how to manage PMax brand exclusions. And there are some good memes we've got on the slides for that section. So do look forward to those. Then Adriaan's going to run us through his top 5 Performance Max scripts that he uses on a daily basis. Of course, if you're impatient and you want to see those scripts straight away, you can find them all now with the links in the docs tab. But if you stick around for that section of the webinar, Adriaan will be giving us a bit more context on why he likes each script and how he tends to use the insights that he gets from them. And then towards the end of the webinar, we will be covering the importance of protecting your PMax campaigns from invalid traffic. And lastly, Adriaan will give us his advice for troubleshooting underperforming PMax campaigns. So that's everything on the agenda for today. So we will move on into the content. So first, we're going to be talking about Gemini AI models. And before we get into its application within PMax, I just wanted to quickly give an overview of what Gemini actually is. So Gemini is Google's long promised next gen general AI model family, developed by Google's AI research lab, DeepMind. And all Gemini models were trained to be quote unquote natively multimodal. In other words, they are able to work with and use more than just words. They were pre-trained with a variety of audio, images, video, code databases, text in different languages. And this sets Gemini apart from other models, such as Google's own previous Lambda model, which was exclusively trained on text data. Lambda can't understand or generate anything other than text, but that isn't the case with the new Gemini models. So what are Gemini models going to allow us to do within PMax? Well, to summarize very quickly, in November last year, Google announced the launch of AI-powered asset generation and image editing within PMax for the US market, and they will soon be expanding those capabilities with Gemini, meaning PMax can write longer headlines with site link generation set to be rolled out soon. In addition, Google is soon updating its image generation models to Imagen 2. With this update on PMax, you will be able to create lifestyle images showing people in action. You can also use image editing to add backgrounds with non-identifiable people. And if you have images that work well already, you can use the new Imagen model to generate more options and scale your creative even further. So all that sounds great, but before I pass over to you, Adriaan, for your take on this, I wanted to just very quickly highlight a few other points from Google's documentation relating to Gemini. So firstly, Google stressed that all advertisers will remain in full control and will be able to review all images and suggested assets for their campaigns. The models won't allow for the generation of images of named people, including celebrities and public figures. And lastly, one point which I thought was interesting and worth mentioning was that Google announced an expansion of their partnership with Canva to help support the rollout of new image generation models. So this means if you start your design or creative process in Canva, an upcoming Canva integration app will make it easier to publish images directly into your PMax campaigns. So I've said more than enough there on Gemini. So to pass over to you, Adriaan, what advice would you give to people when it comes to working with auto-generated assets for PMax?
So that advice that I would give is to really learn how to write good prompts so that you get a good outcome. So yeah, you can, for example, write really short prompts, but I think then the results just will be basic. So yeah, if you invest in writing good prompts, you also can get a better outcome. Also, you can use the headlines, for examples, for ideas. So you don't need to apply them directly. You can still make some changes. So I think you can get ideas faster, and also the ad creation process can become way shorter. An example for small companies that maybe can't edit images all the time, or yeah, it's just too expensive. They, for example, really can use the image editing tool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's really useful for small companies, and for big companies, I think it's still also useful, especially as it gets better. And yeah, they can invest maybe more in good prompt writing, courses in prompt writing. So those are going to be really important, because I think the database should already be good enough, and it's only getting better, and the models are only getting better. But now it's on to us to invest in our skills. So for marketers, new skills are going to be really important, and that is good prompt writing. So not a short sentence, but really long prompt writing with good
So
examples.
when you say really long prompt writing, like, can you give us some examples of the kinds of things that you're putting into prompts or that you like to see in prompts as opposed to, just a single sentence?
So for example, I can use maybe ChatGPT to create a headline for my LinkedIn or a hook, and then I can give it extra information about which style it has to be, what my audience is, and then I get an answer, and then I can even I can still segment it more down. So maybe write it a bit looser or more general or more specific.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like the more detail, the better in the prompt, really. One thing that I wanted to touch on is, like, obviously, if you don't get your prompt right, that's going to create a problem in the output that you'll get. But are there any other pitfalls to be aware of when working with auto-generated assets? And the reason I'm asking this is because for a long time, PMax has had these auto-generated videos, which have been historically not very good. I don't know if there has been any improvement on the auto-generated videos for PMax, but are there any risks or kind of pitfalls you'd flag to people to be aware of?
Yeah, I think you always need to check the assets still, and still check if it's maybe better to create it yourself and how that outcome would be. So it's still growing, and we're getting more and more options at the moment. I don't think the best outcome is there at the moment. It's still getting better. So for sure, don't rely only on these assets.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we'll move on from Gemini, and we will now look at search term insights. So as you can see from Miles's post here, I'm sure many of you watching will know Miles from LinkedIn already. And this post is basically just stating that PMax was recently updated, giving advertisers more visibility over search terms via the search terms insights tab. The keywords on the dashboard on the right here have been blurred out as they're commercially sensitive. But Adriaan, could you outline the new level of visibility that this update provides?
So yeah, first of all, in the post from Miles, we see that you have the groups. So first of all, you see the group, then you can click on a button, and then you get the search terms. The groups are automatically grouped. Then we can see the impressions from the search groups, the conversions, and this just gives us more insight into the impressions we are getting with the campaign. And if we get like really weird search terms, for example, maybe we need to change the feed or the description, or maybe the landing page. Maybe we need to exclude some words. Also, this is one of the first checks I do to see if it's getting branded traffic, a PMax campaign.
That must make your life a lot easier to have this to quickly reference.
Yes, and you can also use a script, but we will talk about that in another slide, to make sure that you get this automatically in a file.
So alongside quickly checking for branded keywords, is there any other advice you'd give to people to get as much value as they can out of this new level of insight?
Yeah, if you maybe want a search campaign to show on a certain keyword, you can check this report and then use exact keywords in your search campaign to make sure that campaign has a higher, that campaign shows for search campaigns if somebody is searching for that keyword.
Yeah.
So that's something, and otherwise it's just a good look. What is PMax doing? Where are your impressions coming from? Do I need to change things? Do I need to add things?
Yeah, it's been long awaited, and I think most advertisers are glad that level of insight's been added.
Yeah, you can even check for trends with a custom date range, for example. So last month we were getting a lot of impressions on these keywords. Now these keywords, did we change something or change something? And check again a month later what has happened now. Where are the impressions coming from now?
Yeah, that makes sense. So the next topic is kind of somewhat related. So the next topic we're going to talk about is search themes. So just to give a quick bit of context for anyone that might be watching that's unfamiliar with search themes. So basically they provide you with a additional way to give signals in PMax to expand your ad reach. Performance Max uses obviously information from your assets, feeds, and landing pages to inform its ad placement decisions. And that means it has the lion's share of control over your ad targeting. But with search themes, you can input your own keywords to fill in gaps within your campaign reach. And as you can see on the slide here, there are two main use cases for search themes. So number one being there isn't enough content on your website or landing page to give Google all the information it needs about the search queries you want to be found for. And you can see the quote on the screen here, which relates to the fact that sometimes landing pages that perform well don't have an awful lot of copy on them. And in which case, that's okay, but you might want to supplement your PMax campaign with some search themes. And the second use case for using search themes is you want to optimize your Performance Max campaign more quickly and drive performance faster. It's also important to note that search themes don't work like traditional keyword targeting, obviously, because it's within PMax. They're simply signals to the PMax algorithm that it can learn from or disregard as it sees fit. So with that in mind, Adriaan, what's your experience of search themes been so far, and when have they been most useful for you?
I've had good experiences with search themes. I think to ramp up a campaign and to give it the right direction, it can be really helpful. Also, like you already said, it can fill in the gaps if you are missing content on landing pages or on your website as a general. Also, you can ramp it up if you have new products or new services in your PMax campaign. So overall, a good impression. And I think it's way easier to add those than to add them with a custom segment, for example. So yeah, I think it's a good future.
And one of the things, I know I mentioned it in the beginning when I talked about the blog that we've written on this subject, but could you talk about how to minimize the risk of cannibalization when you are using PMax search themes?
Yes. So if you have a phrase or broad keyword and you have a search theme, the keyword with the highest ad rank will win. So if you really want a specific keyword and you want to show that for your search campaign and not your PMax campaign, you should use an exact match keyword, and then that will be shown in the search campaign rather than in the PMax campaign. So that's one way how you can control it, for example.
Yeah, I think that's something to be careful with. Just making sure that those exact match keywords are there where they need to be. So the next slide that we've got here, so we're talking about Performance Planner for Performance Max. And as you can see here from Thomas Excel's post 6 months ago, Performance Planner was updated, so you can now use it with all campaign types, including PMax campaigns and demand gen campaigns as well. I also wanted just to give a shout out to Thomas here, because we are referencing some of his LinkedIn posts throughout the content in this webinar today. So Thomas is another great PPC voice to follow on LinkedIn. I know, Adriaan, you've got a webinar coming up with Thomas shortly. Is it next week or is it later than next week?
Yeah, we're planning to do a webinar on LinkedIn growth on Tuesday.
Nice. So if you're interested in LinkedIn growth, I'd check out that webinar with Adriaan and Thomas. As I said, well worth connecting with them if you want to stay up to date with Google Ads news. Anyway, for those who haven't used it much before, Performance Planner is basically allows you to see what you can expect in return for your ad spend. It'll also help you identify the point of diminishing returns, whereby increasing your ad spend will start to have a negative impact on ROAS. And as you can see from Thomas's post, there are two basic requirements for using it. Number one being your PMax campaign must be currently active or have been paused for fewer than 7 days. And number two, you must not have changed the PMax bid strategy in the past 7 days. So I know some people claim this feature is quite underused. So Adriaan, how useful do you find Performance Planner?
I think it's a useful feature, but it depends on the account. If you have high fluctuations in conversions, for example, it can be way harder to predict the results for Google. One thing you can, for example, do is just make a plan. Make a screenshot of it or just write it down and then look on later what has happened, for example. I think it's a useful feature to see where you are at ROAS, for example. What will happen if you give Google more budget, for example. But those are things that you can just make a screenshot from or write down, and then look later into it what really happened, for example. But it's very important that you have steady data and not real high fluctuations, because that's way harder to predict in my eyes.
So steady data being a key point there. Are there any other like potential downfalls or risks associated with Performance Planner? Obviously, like the main one being you have to take it with a pinch of salt because it's Google and it's in their best interest to show you that performance is going to go great and things will be brilliant if you spend more money. But is there anything else that you'd encourage caution with when it comes to Performance Planner?
Yeah, just like you already said, don't fully rely on it, and that's why I'm saying like make a plan. You don't have to act on the plan, but just compare what really happened to see the outcome.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I suppose then you can see how useful it is in your particular case, because that may vary from business to business. So the next topic we've got here is URL rules. So also in September, Google added URL contains targeting functionality to Performance Max. This feature was already available within dynamic search ads, and it functions the same way within PMax. And basically, the feature provides marketers with more control over how their ads are served, as you manually get to choose which URLs to include to send visitors to the most relevant commercial parts of your site. So since a PMax campaign with the final URL expansion turned on can basically redirect users to every URL possible on your site, non-monetizable pages, such as your blogs, your About Us page, and things like that need to be excluded. Now with this new URL rule, you can tell PMax to only redirect users to pages that include commercially relevant URL tokens. So with that said, Adriaan, when do you find yourself using these rules? Is it something that you use on most campaigns, or is it now and again?
Yeah, it really depends on your strategy. For example, if you want more control, you maybe select only a few URLs. But if you want the maximum amount of conversions and you're not really into, you have a real high budget, for example, maybe you will include more URLs, for example. I think it's a good tool that gives us more control. But I would rather prefer the page feeds tool. I think that's a better tool. And that tool also crawls faster. So I think that's a better tool, to be honest.
So is it purely better just because the page feed tool crawls faster, or are there any other reasons why you would select the page feed feature rather than the URL rules?
Yeah, I think if you just scroll your website with, for example, Screaming Frog, you get the right URLs in. You can even give them custom labels. I think that is better, just to see all the URLs. But it depends on how big your website is, for example.
And as you can see just from Jamie Lackey's post on screen here, if you have one PMax campaign with a fine URL expansion turned on, you can use the URL rules to get rid of the non-monetizable pages. But if you have two or more PMax campaigns running, it might be worth switching off final URL expansion for both of them and explicitly specifying the pages that you want to appear within those campaigns.
Yeah, I would also add to check if you have a previous DSA campaign, for example, which URLs were scoring. Because I just a few weeks ago rewatched the PMax Mastery course from Miles and Bob, and you also see that some people they have conversions on blog pages, for example. And if that works for you, that's a specific case. Then you can, of course, add them if you want and test with it.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It really depends. So if you can see performance from previous months, for example, how pages are performing, then you can add them up.
Yeah, so it really needs to be done on a business by business basis. Like I said, you generally want to exclude blog pages, but that might not be the case in all brands and businesses. There might be blogs which actually perform quite well in terms of conversions.
Yeah, so as we always say, it depends.
Sorry, guys, to not give you a concrete, definitive answer, but that's the nature of PPC. So the next slide that we've got here is an interesting one. what you can see on screen here is the PMax campaign modification request form, and you can find a link to this modification request form in the docs tab. As far as I know, like not everyone is aware that this exists, and for that reason, it's probably quite underused. So, Adriaan, could you outline how people can use this form to exclude any keyword, topic, or placement that they'd like from their PMax campaigns?
Yeah, so there is a support page from Google where you can fill in your account name, and then you can exclude keywords for your Performance Max campaign. It's not an easy way to do. They make it hard. I would rather see that they would implement it in the interface. But the setup for PMax is that they want to, they really want advertisers to go broad, to give all the channels and all the keywords a chance. But you can exclude keyword topics and placement for PMax with this modification request form. You can already search it now and you can find it in the Google search results.
Yeah. So basically, this is something that you use occasionally, but it's not something that you use all the time because you're kind of feeding the algorithms with as much data as possible. One other question slightly related to this is in December last year, it became possible to exclude Search Partner Network from Performance Max. So how can advertisers do that?
That's not available at the moment. I think they did it until the 4th of March. You needed to contact a rep, then that rep could opt you out. And now it's changed. You now can see the impressions of the placements of the search partners, and then you can exclude them on account level.
My bad, I wasn't aware of that change. But yeah, useful to have you here, Adriaan, to clarify that.
Yeah, it's not really talked about. I think Joanne Ferrand wrote an article on his LinkedIn about, and he just posted a specific article from a journalist who had written about it.
Yeah, I must go check out Johan's page and find that article.
For sure, for sure, check him out.
Just on the topic of exclusions, while we're here, you can also in the docs tab, you can download Lunio's 100K exclusion list for display campaigns for free. So you can give your display campaigns an instant uplift by excluding low quality sites and junk mobile app inventory. So you can find that in the docs tab as well if you're interested in exclusions, but for display campaigns rather than PMax campaigns in that case. So next, as promised in the introduction, we've got some nice memes on this slide related to PMax and brand exclusion. So as we can see, there's clearly a problem with PMax stealing and cannibalizing brand traffic. And while I'm sure there are many people watching this webinar who do already exclude brand from PMax, there is still a significant proportion of marketers out there who aren't doing this yet. And I think for some less experienced marketers and advertisers, I think this often results in them thinking that Performance Max is performing very well for them. You know, the results are great, which is very convenient for Google that that's the case, but we won't get into that now. That's a conversation for a different day. But Adriaan, first of all, I think you said you experience this quite commonly when you work with clients that they're not excluding brand. Is that right?
Yes. I see that just happening a lot of the times that there's still branded traffic in the PMax campaign. For example, somebody maybe has 30 conversions, and then I just see that 18 conversions came out of brand, for example. So the real price of the 12 conversions is way higher, but they don't see it. So yeah, that's a shame, to be honest.
So that makes perfect sense as to why it's so important to exclude brand, is because it kind of distorts your view of how your Performance Max campaign is actually doing. It can make you think that things are going a lot better than they actually are. So when it comes to putting this into practice, how would you actually go about, excluding brand and making sure that you're catching those terms somewhere else?
Yeah, you can, for example, use a standard shopping campaign to make sure that the branded traffic is going there and exclude branded traffic from the PMax campaign.
Yeah. So definitely, if you aren't already doing this, it's definitely one to look into, and it will give you a much clearer and accurate view of how your PMax campaign is actually performing. So the next slide is it's an important slide, and we're going to be talking about scripts for PMax. So 2 of the scripts on the list that we've got are from Mike Rhodes, and whenever anyone says PMax scripts, Mike Rhodes is the person who immediately comes to my mind anyway, hence the meme here on screen. So special shout out to Mike and all his hard work to help out all of us in the rest of the PPC community. And also big thanks to the other script creators who we featured in this list. As I said in the introduction, all these scripts are available within the Docs tab, and you can find the links to them if you want to use them. All the scripts are free with the exception of the last one from Product Hero, which Adriaan will say a bit more about in a second. So Adriaan, could you talk us through each one of these scripts here, what each one does, and why you find it useful?
Yeah, for sure. So the first script is the PMax spend allocation script by Mike Rhodes. I still remember it as the day of yesterday that this script went live. This is an awesome script because you can see the channels from Performance Max and how they are performing. So for example, shopping, display, video, and search. Based on that information, you can choose to go full PMax, or you can choose to go feed-only PMax. So that's really a good tool. Also, when your Performance Max campaign, for example, the ROAS is going down, you can check, okay, what happened? Is there a change in channels? Because sometimes Performance Max likes to show your video, for example, with a real high budget for 1 week, and then your performance can go down. So you can explain more and have more insights with this script. I really recommend to implement this script if you have a Performance Max campaign. Then the second script is just a script that shows your search campaigns. I think it's also really interesting. You can just go to the Excel tab where you load that information and see the search term insights. So it's also a real good script. Then the third script is this is a new script because I think it went live 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's by Smarter E-commerce, but I think Mike Ryan is the face of Smarter E-commerce. So that's why it says by Mike Ryan. This just shows the branded traffic in a Performance Max campaign, for example, how much conversions that is getting, for example, and if you make changes to the campaign, what would happen, for example. Then the fourth and fifth are they labelize the products in Performance Max, and you can put them in buckets, for example. How you do this, you normally have 4 buckets. You can group 2 together, but also you can create for every single bucket a PMax campaign if you want. With these buckets, you can say, okay, so we have the best sellers. We want to give that more budget and another ROAS than, for example, bleeders. So that's really interesting. You need to have enough conversions to do this. I would say at least 30 conversions per month for every campaign. So that's why I said you can also group some together if you want. But those are just great to segment down. And also, if a product, for example, is not a bestseller anymore, it can go automatically to another group again. So that's really useful. And I know Floos de Schrijver from FlowBoost has a free script and also a paid script. And Product Hero, I think they only have a paid script, and that's together with their CSS.
Nice. Thanks for running us through those. And I can just see Thomas Excel in the chat there posting about a new PMax placement cleaner script, which has just came out yesterday. So that's brand new news.
Cool.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to include that in the webinar for today. But well worth checking out the PMax placement cleaner script. Thomas, if you if you're there in the chat, if you could drop a link to that or let people know where they can find it, that would be super useful. But thanks for flagging that up. And thanks, Adriaan, for talking us through each of those scripts. Yeah, the Flow Boost Labelizer script is certainly useful if you want to try that out for free and get an idea of what that product hero script would be doing. So the next topic we're going to talk about is the kind of importance of protecting your Performance Max campaigns from invalid traffic. So the graph that you can see on screen here is taken from our Lunio's 2024 Wasted Ad Spend report, and there's a link to download the full version of that report in the Docs tab. Apologies for referencing the Docs tab so many times, but there's just a lot of useful resources and stuff to signpost people towards in this session. It's well worth downloading the report. There's lots of useful insights in there. It's free. It also took me many hours of hard work to create this report, so it would make me happy if you grabbed a copy and shared it with other marketers who might find it useful. And of course, thank you if you've already got the report and you've already checked it out. Anyway, the report was based on a data set of 2.6 billion paid ad clicks from more than 60,000 ad accounts we protect here at Lunio. Specifically, we were interested in looking at the number of legitimate clicks versus invalid clicks to work out average invalid traffic rates across industries, channels, company sizes, and regions. And when we segmented that click data by channel, we got this graph that you can see on screen here. And the worst offenders for high average invalid traffic rates were LinkedIn, Twitter, and Meta. There is a lot to say about that, but we don't have time to get into it here today. But basically, the TLDR is if you're spending a lot of money on those channels with no protection in place against invalid traffic, it's highly likely that you're wasting a significant amount of your ad spend. In comparison, most Google channels, including PMax, Search, Display, and YouTube, performed relatively well. Google do seem to be well ahead of other platforms when it comes to handling invalid traffic, but that said, they still haven't solved the problem. So the average IVT rate for PMax campaigns that we found at Lunio came in at 5.96%, which is just over 1% higher than the Google search and shopping campaign IVT rate that we found. And on the face of it, that might not sound like much, but when you're working with an ad spend of hundreds of thousands or millions per year, that represents a huge sum of money and represents a significant loss of campaign efficiency because obviously those invalid clicks will never convert. Just a quick side note before I continue on here, our PMax protection at Lunio is not based on IP exclusions because obviously you can't exclude IPs from PMax. Instead, it works on an exclusion audience model where invalid users are detected and then added to a continually growing negative audience to prevent PMax from showing more and more ads to that same fake user. So when we look at the data, it makes sense that PMax would have a higher rate of invalid traffic compared to standard search and shopping campaigns, mainly for the two reasons listed on the slide here. So since PMax forces the use of display ads, that inevitably results in a higher volume of invalid clicks. And in addition, invalid clicks and fake leads are generally cheaper than legitimate ones. And because PMax is algorithmically driven, this can sometimes create a negative feedback loop whereby the campaign will continue to seek out more and more junk clicks and conversions, which never translate into revenue simply because the acquisition costs are lower. So now that we've established the baseline average for IVT rates across PMax campaigns, let's quickly just look at some of the variability within that data. So while the average IVT rate for PMax was 5.96, on the low end at Lunio, we see PMax campaigns with IVT rates around 1.5%. And on the high end, we see PMax campaigns with IVT rates around 18%. And the reality of the situation is there's no way to know exactly for sure where your own campaigns fall within that range without auditing your traffic. So if you are interested to find out how much IVT your PMax campaigns are currently bringing in, you can request a free 2-week traffic audit with Lunio, where we will monitor and analyze all your clicks coming through from Google Ads. And at the end, you will find out exactly where you fall within that range from 1.5% to 18%, as well as seeing how your Performance Max campaigns compare to your standard shopping and search campaigns in terms of invalid traffic. So there is a link to get that free traffic audit with Lunio, also in the docs section if you're interested. But interesting point that I want to raise before we move on. So what I will say is that the PMax campaigns that we see with high IVT rates of 10% or more basically tend to come from B2B lead gen activity, hence the meme you can see on screen here. So it's no secret that PMax for lead gen is often plagued by low quality traffic, spam lead submissions. And for brands that were experiencing those issues, Lunio has played a key role in driving up their lead quality via PMax by significantly reducing that IVT rate over time. So if you are working for a B2B brand, I'd highly recommend auditing your traffic if you're running PMax for lead gen, because you really want to find out if you fall into that bracket of high IVT percentage. Before we move on, just to discuss our last topic, Adriaan, I just wanted to ask if you've seen any of those issues firsthand with spam leads coming from PMax on the B2B side.
So I don't use PMax a lot for B2B. What I have seen in the latest documentation of Google, and that was around PMax Q&A. That I think everybody should read that. They even talked about B2B leads for PMax, and they told use CAPTCHA and make the lead forms, for example, more difficult. So I think they're well aware of the fake leads that are coming through, and they're even saying that we need to make the forms harder. Normally they would say make it easy to buy, but for the leads, for example, and B2B, that's really different. So yeah, I've heard a lot about it, but to be honest, I don't use a lot of PMax for B2B at the moment.
Yeah. Just for, if anyone is using PMax for B2B, Bob of Bob and Miles, he has created a PMax campaign structure called Fire and Ice, which he recommends using if you are using PMax for B2B lead gen activity. So again, he's documented that on his own blog, and I've included a link to Bob's Fire and Ice campaign structure in the docs tab, so you can check that out if you're interested. Also, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Thomas XL, for finding that link to the new script that's come out. We appreciate that, and we'll be on the lookout for your post about it soon.
Yeah, I've just had a look at the script, and it looks like it's excluding. Yeah, the name already says it. It looks like it's excluding the bad placements from PMax. So very interesting. Just happened yesterday. So thanks, Thomas. Thanks for sharing.
Yes, thank you very much, Thomas. I appreciate it. We must get you on a Lunio webinar yourself sometime in the future, but we'll have that conversation another time.
Make sure to follow Thomas, and he also has a great newsletter. I think he does it once monthly, just with the biggest updates. So
yes, thanks. Please do. Yeah, thanks, Adriaan, and thanks again, Thomas. If we just move on to the last slide that we've got with my favorite meme of the day, just because I'm a fan of Happy Gilmore. Basically, just to close before we get into the Q&A. If a Performance Max campaign is underperforming, Adriaan, what advice would you give to someone to help troubleshoot that? Like, where are the areas where they should focus on?
So I would check the script from Mike Rhodes, for example, which channels are performing, how the channels are performing. Then I would look at the products, because PMax has the tendency to give a lot of budget to only a few products. And then you can decide, okay, I'm going to quit with maybe 60% of the products and use them for standard shopping, for example, to have more control over the budget. Yeah, you could look at the feed, for example. is brand in your PMax campaign, yes or no? Because it can look good on the interface, but on the back end, are you getting good results? Are you getting enough profit, for example? But also it really depends if the product sells, if you have a good price, for example, good reviews. So also just find out why are the products not selling, for example. Maybe there's an issue on the website. Is the website looking good, for example? So you really have to find out what could be the reason. And I would look at those things, for example.
Yeah.
And also, if PMax doesn't work for you, you can always test standard shopping, for example.
Yeah. How often do you find yourself doing that, where you kind of revert back to standard shopping?
You can always have just catch-all standard shopping besides your PMax campaign, for example. A lot of people talk about that PMax also has, of course, remarketing in it. So the traffic could be much warmer. And maybe if you have a standard campaign shopping for catch-all products, you get more cold traffic, for example. And that cold traffic will lead to more profit in the next few years, maybe, or few months. Because those people have maybe a higher repeat rate, for example, and those are new clients. So we'll also check for new clients versus returning clients, for example.
Nice. That makes sense. I'm just conscious of time here. So we have got 10 minutes left. So we'll leave it there for the content today. And with the time we have left, we will address a few questions from the Q&A tab. I can see there's been a lot of questions submitted, quite a lot. I don't think we'll be able to get through them all in the time we have, but we will cover as many high priority questions as we can. Of course, if anything we covered today has piqued your interest in relation to fake clicks and invalid traffic, you can sign up for the free traffic audit with Lunio via the QR code here or direct via the address listed on the slide. So with that said, let me just scroll through and see if we can find some questions. One sec. One sec. I'll just share this question first, Adriaan.
Yeah, sure.
So how accurate is the performance planner, and does it depend on the amount of conversions you get?
Yeah, just like I said, it depends on the fluctuation of the conversions. If you, for example, 1 month you have maybe 30 and the next month you have maybe 90 conversions, it's way harder for the performance planner to make a plan for the future. So you can check this yourself by just checking the plan for the spend that you're going to do, and then check the outcome and make a comparison. So I know Bob Meyer did this because he told me this, or he told it in a class of his. So that's a good idea.
Nice. I'm just going to bring up this question because it's been upvoted quite a few times. So what recommendations do you have for testing within PMax? If you want to test different audience signals, do you just add them to existing ones, or do you set up a new one first?
No, I just would set them up as new ones to see what that's doing.
I'm interested to know. I'm interested to know this one. Let me find it. Where is it? Sorry, I've got so many questions. I need to load more here. Yeah. So, Adriaan, where do you find all the news, or is that a trade secret?
No, it's not a trade secret. So I just have one big document, and I think other writers about the news also have that, where I check what is happening, and then, for example, people also send me news, and then I give them a mention or a tag. I post the news, they get some followers and impressions, and then I also scroll to my timeline and I find news, for example. So that will be the 3 sources.
Nice. And same questioner again. Will AI generate headlines in different languages. So I think this is referring to the Gemini models and whether they can do that in different languages. I'm not sure.
So it was English. Normally they roll the updates in America, the betas in America. Then they come to other countries in English, and then normally it will take some time, and then they go to other markets that are non-English. So for sure they will generate headlines in different languages, but I think that will take some time.
One sec, let me just review. Okay, so we've got this question here. Is running PMax straight away for a relatively new brand or business feasible, and should they run it?
So if it's a new brand and they do not have like a history of sales, it depends on your strategy. If you're like, I want to control my budget more and do not take too much risk, maybe a search campaign first is better. But also depends, is it e-com? Because maybe then you can test the standard shopping in the beginning. Then if you get 30 conversions, you can go for PMax, for example. So it depends on the budget. How much risk are you willing to take, for example? How good are your creatives? But yeah, you can do it if you want, but I think it's maybe better first to start with standard shopping and a search campaign. It also depends on the company.
So the next question here from Clemens, understandable. So why would you exclude brand if it's highly profitable, considering whether a hybrid business model where we are not the only ones selling our product? Yeah, could you just reiterate, Adriaan, why it's important to exclude brand?
Yeah, if you have your brand in your campaign, then we're not excluding it from advertising. It's still okay to advertise with a brand. It's more that we want to have it in a specific campaign because the results of the brand, the ROAS of a brand is much higher. So we want to have it in another campaign because if I have it in just one big campaign, that big campaign looks better than it maybe is. And I also have less control. So that's the reason why you normally would exclude the brand. Of course, if your brand only maybe has one conversion and you don't have a big brand or something, maybe you leave it in. But I would prefer to exclude it.
Yeah.
So it's still okay to advertise with your brand. I have nothing against it. But yeah, it's better to have it in a different campaign.
Yeah, that makes sense. We had that question just come through a few times about excluding brand and questions around that. So I think you've kind of addressed all of those there with your response, Adriaan. And I'm just going to, because we're running out of time, I'm just going to ask the final question. And this one is to you, Adriaan, from Matt Jones. And it's asking, why do you not use PMax for B2B lead gen, for example, at a tech-enabled SaaS company?
So first of all, if a B2B company, for example, has not a shopping product, it just only gives me display and video and less control. So that's the reason. I think you need to have a real high budget. And for example, the display placement, I think that can get a lot of fake leads, for example. So I would then maybe rather have search and then a display campaign, which I can control more.
Nice. I just see one more question about whether we're going to at Lunio do a webinar about demand gen campaigns, and thank you for that suggestion. It's definitely something we'll keep in mind for future. We haven't got a demand gen campaign or webinar plan just yet, but definitely want to think about for the future. So just for time, we'll have to leave it there. But big thanks to you, Adriaan, for joining us today. So many useful insights for people to take away. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or direct people towards before we finish?
Not really. Just look at your specific case with the information that I've given you, and just keep testing. And also about the demand gen webinar, I know Thomas Esel knows a lot about demand gen, so that could be interesting.
this could be the next webinar taking shape already. So Thomas, expect me to reach out to you in future about a demand gen webinar if you're still watching. Likewise, if you have any questions for us at Lunio, you can contact us directly via hello@lunio.ai, and we'll be happy to help. As I mentioned before, if you are interested in getting a demo of Lunio, you can get your traffic audit and see how much of your traffic is currently invalid, and you can do that via the link in the docs tab. Lastly, big thanks to everyone for tuning in, either here at the live event or on demand. Hope to see you again at the next webinar, which may be on demand gen campaigns. And take care, everyone, and wishing you all the best with your Performance Max campaigns.
Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.
See you. Bye. Bye.